Let's go Broncos! Something is happening at Broncos OTAs that I don't think enough people are talking about right now, and if the early signs are accurate, several young players may be on the verge of completely changing the conversation around this roster. Because while everyone naturally focuses on the biggest stars, the most important developments often come from the players nobody expects to steal the spotlight. And trust me, that's exactly what appears to be happening. One young defender is receiving praise directly from the coaching staff and continues making plays every time he's on the field. A quarterback battle that many fans thought was already decided may not be nearly as settled as it seems. And then there's a wide receiver competition that is becoming more intriguing with every passing OTA practice. The fascinating part? These storylines are all connected by one thing: opportunity. Opportunity for young players to prove they deserve bigger roles. Opportunity to force difficult roster decisions. And opportunity to become some of the biggest surprises of the upcoming season. But here's the question that keeps getting bigger every single day. Could one of these young Broncos be preparing for a breakout season that nobody sees coming? Because if the reports coming out of practice continue at this pace, some players may be impossible for the coaching staff to ignore once training camp begins. Before we get into everything, make sure you've already hit the like button if you believe the future of the Denver Broncos is brighter than ever. And I want every optimistic Broncos fan watching right now to comment, "Go Broncos!" The next stars are already here. Personally, I love these types of stories. Anyone can talk about established stars. What excites me most is when young players start forcing their way into the conversation through performance. That's how great teams are built. That's how depth becomes a strength. And that's how organizations discover future starters before the rest of the league realizes what they have. In my opinion, some of the most important Broncos storylines right now aren't about the veterans, they're about the young players quietly earning trust behind the scenes and positioning themselves for much bigger roles. Now let's talk about why Q Robinson continues generating so much excitement inside the Broncos organization and why some coaches already view him as a future starter. Personally, I love stories like this because championships are rarely built only around star players. They're built around depth. They're built around player development. They're built around young talent taking advantage of opportunities when they arrive. And based on everything we're hearing from OTAs, several young Broncos appear determined to make sure the coaching staff notices them before training camp even begins. One of the names generating the most positive attention coming out of OTAs is Q Robinson. And honestly, the more you hear about him, the harder it becomes not to get excited about his future. According to the discussion, Vance Joseph himself reportedly described Robinson as a future starter. That's not the kind of praise coaches hand out casually. When a defensive coordinator starts publicly expressing that level of confidence in a young player, Broncos fans should pay attention. What's particularly interesting is that Robinson isn't being praised simply for potential. He's making plays. He's producing. And he's continuing to show up during practices. The discussion highlighted a sack during OTA work that caught attention, but perhaps more importantly, it emphasized the overall impression Robinson continues making on the coaching staff. Speed, strength, effort, development, all the traits you want to see from a young pass rusher trying to carve out a larger role. And when you think about the Broncos' defensive philosophy, it makes perfect sense why this matters so much. Denver thrives when it can rotate pass rushers. Denver thrives when fresh legs keep attacking quarterbacks. Denver thrives when pressure comes from multiple sources. The more young players capable of contributing, the more dangerous the defense becomes. That's why Q Robinson may be one of the most important developmental stories on the roster right now. Because if he takes the leap many people expect, it gives the Broncos another weapon in a position group that already has significant talent. But while Robinson is creating excitement defensively, another veteran continues proving why he's one of the most valuable players on the entire team. Zach Allen. And honestly, I think Broncos fans sometimes take him for granted. The discussion made a strong case that Allen may be one of the most disruptive defensive players in football, even if traditional statistics don't always tell the entire story. According to the information discussed, Allen consistently generates pressure despite facing some of the toughest assignments every week, including regular double teams. That's what makes his impact so impressive. It's easy to appreciate sack totals. It's easy to appreciate tackle numbers. But pressure changes games. Pressure forces mistakes. Pressure speeds up quarterbacks. Pressure creates opportunities for everyone else on the defense. And according to the discussion, Allen remains among some of the most productive pressure-generating defenders in the league. What stood out to me was the argument that Allen's value extends far beyond the box score. Because when offenses commit extra blockers towards stopping one player, everyone else benefits. Pass rush lanes open. One-on-one matchups appear. The entire defensive front becomes more dangerous. That's the kind of influence elite defensive linemen provide. Then we arrive at one of the most fascinating offensive storylines from OTAs, the backup quarterback battle. And according to the discussion, Sam Ehlinger continues building momentum. The reports described another day where he impressed observers, showing touch on several throws despite also throwing an interception. More importantly, there appears to be growing belief that he has a legitimate chance to secure the backup quarterback role. Now that's where things become really interesting, because this isn't simply about winning a roster spot. This discussion involves roster construction, salary cap management, future planning, and potentially some very difficult decisions. The source material specifically highlighted the financial difference between Sam Ehlinger and Jarrett Stidham, raising questions about whether Denver could eventually save cap space if the younger option continues outperforming expectations. And that's exactly why training camp becomes so important. Every throw matters. Every preseason snap matters. Every practice rep matters. Because if the competition remains close, the financial component naturally becomes part of the conversation. Personally, I think this is one of the most underrated battles on the roster right now. Not because the backup quarterback is expected to start, but because quarterback depth is incredibly important over the course of a long season. And because roster decisions at that position often create ripple effects throughout the entire team. And that's where this story becomes incredibly interesting for Broncos fans. Because the battle for the WR3 position might be one of the most competitive competitions on the entire roster. According to the discussion, Pat Bryant continues drawing praise from Sean Payton, who highlighted several encouraging aspects of his development. The reports described a player who looks stronger, more physical, more confident, and more comfortable within the offense. And when a young receiver starts earning positive attention from the head coach during OTAs, that's something worth paying attention to. What's particularly intriguing is that Bryant isn't competing in an empty room. Far from it. The Broncos have multiple young receivers fighting for opportunities. Multiple players with different strengths. Multiple players who believe they deserve snaps. And that's exactly what makes this battle so difficult to predict. The discussion highlighted an important point about Bryant's game. He's not necessarily the flashy gadget player. He's not necessarily the pure speed threat. What stands out is his reliability, his ability to move the chains, his contested catch ability, his physical style of play, and his potential value in key situations where quarterbacks need somebody they can trust. Those qualities matter, especially in critical moments, especially on third down, especially in the red zone. And according to the discussion, Bryant already showed flashes of those strengths despite dealing with multiple injury setbacks throughout portions of last season. That's what makes his current progress so encouraging. Because one of the recurring themes from the discussion was how much effort Bryant reportedly put into improving physically during the offseason. More strength, better preparation, more durability. The goal appears simple: stay healthy and maximize every opportunity. But here's where the competition becomes truly fascinating. The WR3 battle isn't just Pat Bryant versus one player. It's Pat Bryant versus multiple talented young receivers. The discussion specifically pointed out how each player brings something different to the table. Different strengths, different skill sets, different ways to help the offense. And because of that, there may not be an obvious answer right now. That's exactly why training camp could become so important.